The desert wind howled, carrying secrets older than the sun-bleached bones buried in New Mexico's sands. Riley Harper clutched her notebook, her heart pounding as she stared at the cryptic text on her phone. "Meet me at the old mission. Midnight. Come alone." She was 28, a journalist chasing a story that could unravel a decade-old conspiracy, but now she felt like prey. The story had started innocently enough. A tip about illegal land deals tied to a powerful corporation, Nexus Corp, operating out of Albuquerque. Riley, with her relentless curiosity and a knack for sniffing out corruption, had been digging for weeks. She'd interviewed whistleblowers, pored over public records, and followed leads that led her to this desolate stretch of desert. But tonight something felt wrong. The air was too still, the stars too sharp. Her rented Jeep was parked a mile back, hidden behind a cluster of cacti, but the weight of being watched pressed against her chest. She reached the crumbling adobe walls of the mission, its bell tower a jagged silhouette against the moon. "Hello," she called, her voice swallowed by the vastness. No answer. Only the crunch of gravel under her boots and the faint hum of her own pulse. Then a shadow moved, a figure stepping from the darkness. Riley's hand flew to the pepper spray in her pocket, but the figure raised both hands, palms open. "Riley Harper?" The voice was low, warm like honey over gravel. A woman stepped into the moonlight, her dark hair catching the silver glow. She was maybe 30, with deep brown eyes that held a storm of emotions. Fear, urgency, and something softer, unguarded. "I'm Elena Marquez. I sent the message. We don't have much time." Riley's grip on the pepper spray loosened, but her instincts screamed caution. "You said you had proof about Nexus. Where is it?" Elena's gaze darted to the horizon, as if expecting ghosts to rise from the sand. "It's not safe here. They're watching. Follow me." Before Riley could protest, Elena grabbed her hand, her touch electric, pulling her toward a narrow path behind the mission. The contact sent a jolt through Riley. Not just fear, but something else, something that made her breath catch. They moved quickly, Elena leading her through a maze of rocky outcrops. "I've been tracking Nexus for years," Elena whispered, her voice barely audible over the wind. "They're not just buying land, they're covering up something much bigger. People have disappeared for knowing less than you do." Riley's mind raced. She'd heard rumors of missing activists, silenced whistleblowers. Her latest source, a former Nexus employee, had vanished days ago. "Who's they?" she pressed, her journalist skepticism warring with the growing knot in her stomach. Elena stopped abruptly, her eyes locking onto Riley's. "The people who own this desert. The ones who'll kill to keep their secrets buried." She stepped closer, her voice dropping to a desperate whisper. "I'm risking everything to help you, Riley. Trust me." Before Riley could respond, headlights sliced through the darkness. A black SUV roared into view, its tires spitting gravel. Elena's face paled. "Run!" she hissed, yanking Riley toward a shallow ravine. They scrambled down, thorns tearing at their clothes, as the SUV's doors slammed open. Shouts echoed, male voices sharp and commanding. Riley's heart thundered as they crouched behind a boulder. Elena's hand found hers again, squeezing tightly. "Stay quiet," she breathed. Riley nodded, her pulse racing not just from fear but from the warmth of Elena's grip, the way it anchored her in the chaos. For a moment their eyes met and Riley saw something raw, unspoken. A connection that felt like it had been waiting for them both. The men's footsteps grew closer, their flashlight beams cutting through the night. Riley's mind spun with questions. Who was Elena, really? Why was she here, risking her life for a stranger? And why did her touch feel like the only thing keeping Riley from falling apart? As the beams swept closer, Elena leaned in, her lips brushing Riley's ear. "If we get out of this," she whispered, "I'll tell you everything." The promise hung between them, fragile but heavy, as the men's voices grew louder. Riley didn't know if they'd survive the night, but one thing was certain. Her life had just collided with something far bigger than a story, and Elena Marquez was at the heart of it. The ravine was a trap, offering little cover. Riley's breath hitched as she heard the men split up, their boots crunching closer. Elena's hand tightened around hers, a silent vow. "There's a cave," Elena whispered, pointing to a shadowed crevice in the rock face. "We can hide there." They crawled, dirt smudging their faces, until they squeezed into the narrow cave. It was barely wide enough for them to sit side by side, their shoulders pressed together. The air was cool, damp, and smelled of earth. Outside, the men's voices faded, then surged again, as if they'd picked up a trail. Riley's heart pounded so loudly she was sure it would give them away. "Why are you doing this?" Riley whispered, her voice trembling. "You don't even know me." Elena's eyes, barely visible in the dim light, softened. "I know enough. I've read your articles, Riley. You're not like the others. You don't stop until you find the truth. I couldn't let them get to you." Riley's chest tightened. There was something in Elena's voice. Pain maybe, or a longing that mirrored her own. She'd spent years chasing stories, keeping people at arm's length, but Elena's presence was unraveling her defenses. "What's the truth?" Riley asked, her voice barely a breath. Elena hesitated, then reached into her jacket, pulling out a small, battered journal. "This," she said, pressing it into Riley's hands. "It's everything I've found on Nexus. Names, dates, locations. They're stealing land from indigenous communities, using it for something unnatural. But if they find us with this, we're dead." Riley's fingers traced the journal's worn cover, her mind reeling. Before she could ask more, a beam of light swept across the cave's entrance. Elena pulled her closer, their bodies pressed tightly together, hearts racing in sync. The moment stretched, suspended between fear and something deeper, something that made Riley's skin hum. The light passed. The men moved on. But Riley knew this was only a pause. The truth was out there, buried in the desert, and so was danger. Elena's journal was a ticking bomb, and the woman beside her, artist ally Enigma, was the only one she could trust. For now. As they waited in the dark, Riley's thoughts spiraled. She'd come to New Mexico for a story, but she'd stumbled into a war. And Elena? Elena was no ordinary source. She was a spark, a mystery, a risk Riley wasn't sure she could afford, but one she couldn't walk away from. The cave's damp chill seeped into Riley's bones, but Elena's warmth beside her kept the cold at bay. The journal in her hands felt like a grenade, its pages heavy with secrets that could topple empires, or get them both killed. Outside, the men's voices faded into the desert night, but the threat lingered like a storm on the horizon. Riley opened the journal, her fingers trembling as she angled it toward the faint moonlight filtering through the cave's entrance. The pages were filled with meticulous notes in Elena's slanted handwriting. Dates, coordinates, names of Nexus executives, and cryptic references to Project Eclipse. One entry caught her eye. Sanctuary Mesa, 2015. Relocation of Navajo families. Contaminated soil reports suppressed. Riley's stomach churned. She'd heard whispers of forced displacements, but this was proof, raw and undeniable. "What is Project Eclipse?" Riley whispered, her voice barely audible over the distant howl of the wind. Elena's jaw tightened, her eyes flickering with something like guilt. "It's why I contacted you. Nexus isn't just stealing land. They're experimenting. Something dangerous, maybe biological. I don't know the full scope, but people who got too close, they vanished." Riley's mind raced, connecting dots to her own investigation. She'd uncovered Nexus's shady land acquisitions, but experiments? That was a new layer of darkness. "How do you know all this?" she asked, studying Elena's face. The woman's beauty was striking even in the dim light. High cheekbones, full lips, eyes that held stories she wasn't ready to tell. But there was pain there too, etched in the lines around her mouth. Elena looked away, her fingers brushing the cave wall. "My brother Mateo worked for Nexus. He was a geologist. 2 years ago, he started asking questions about Sanctuary Mesa. Then he disappeared. I've been piecing it together ever since. Riley's heart sank. She knew the weight of loss, the way it carved hollows in your soul. Her own mother had died when she was 15, leaving her to navigate a world that felt too big, too cruel. I'm sorry, she said softly, her hand brushing Elena's arm. The touch was brief, but it sent a spark through her, a quiet ache she didn't have time to name. Elena met her gaze, and for a moment, the world shrank to just the two of them. Don't be sorry, she said. Just help me stop them. Before Riley could respond, a faint crackle broke the silence. A radio close by. Check the caves, a man's voice barked. Elena's eyes widened, and she grabbed Riley's hand, pulling her deeper into the crevice. The space narrowed, forcing them to press closer, their breaths mingling in the dark. Riley's pulse raced, not just from fear but from the way Elena's body fit against hers, steady and sure. They're coming, Elena whispered, her lips so close Riley could feel their warmth. If they find us, they'll take the journal. We can't let that happen. Riley nodded, slipping the journal into her jacket. What's the plan? Elena's eyes darted to the cave's entrance, then back to Riley. There's a safe house in Taos about 20 miles north. My friend Clara runs it. She's part of a network helping people targeted by Nexus. If we can get there, we'll have time to figure out our next move. The radio crackled again, closer now. Riley's mind spun. Taos was a long shot, especially on foot, with armed men hunting them. But Elena's determination was infectious, and the thought of giving up, of letting Nexus win, was unthinkable. Okay, Riley said. Let's move. They waited until the radio chatter faded, then slipped out of the cave, keeping low. The desert was a maze of shadows, every rock and shrub a potential threat. Elena led the way, her movements swift and silent, like she'd navigated this terrain 1,000 times. Riley followed, her journalist's instincts screaming to ask more questions, but survival took priority. They reached a dry creek bed, its banks offering some cover. Elena paused, scanning the horizon. We need to get to my truck, she said. It's hidden a mile east. If we can reach it, we're halfway to Taos. Riley nodded, but a flicker of doubt crept in. Elena knew too much about Nexus, about the desert, about Riley herself. Why had she chosen her, a small-time journalist from Denver, to trust with this? The question gnawed at her, but there was no time to dwell. Headlights flashed in the distance, and Elena grabbed her arm. Go! They ran, their boots pounding the earth, dodging sagebrush and rocks. The SUV was gaining, its engine a low growl. Riley's lungs burned, but Elena's grip kept her moving. They dove behind a cluster of boulders just as the vehicle roared past, its light sweeping the ground inches from their hiding spot. Riley's chest heaved as she caught her breath. Elena was close, too close, her face inches away. In the moonlight, her eyes were fierce, but there was something else, a vulnerability that made Riley's heart stutter. You okay? Elena asked, her voice soft but urgent. Yeah, Riley lied, her mind a tangle of fear and something warmer, something dangerous. She'd spent her life chasing stories, not feelings, but Elena was rewriting that script. They waited until the SUV was a speck on the horizon, then moved again, sticking to the shadows. The truck was where Elena said it would be, a battered blue pickup half hidden by a tarp. They climbed in and Elena gunned the engine, the vehicle lurching onto a dirt road. Riley clutched the journal, its weight a reminder of the stakes. As they sped toward Taos, Elena's silence was heavy. Riley glanced at her, taking in the way her hands gripped the wheel, the tension in her shoulders. You don't have to do this alone, Riley said quietly. Whatever this is, I'm in. Elena's eyes flicked to her, a flicker of gratitude breaking through her guarded expression. You don't know what you're signing up for, Riley. Then tell me, Riley said, her voice steady despite the chaos. All of it. Elena's lips parted, but before she could speak, a deafening crack split the air. The truck swerved as a tire blew out, sending them skidding toward a ditch. Riley braced herself, her heart in her throat. The hunters were back, and they weren't letting them escape. The truck skidded, gravel spraying like shrapnel as Elena wrestled the wheel. Riley gripped the door, her heart slamming against her ribs as the vehicle lurched into the ditch, metal groaning. The blown tire was no accident. A sniper's bullet, precise and deadly, had found its mark. "Get down!" Elena shouted, shoving Riley toward the floorboard. Another shot rang out, shattering the rear windshield. Glass rained over them and Riley's hands flew to cover her head, the journal slipping to the floor. Elena killed the engine, plunging them into eerie silence, broken only by the distant hum of the approaching SUV. Riley's mind raced, her journalist's instincts kicking in even as fear clawed at her. "They're trying to box us in," she whispered, peering over the dashboard. The SUV's headlights were a predatory glare, closing fast. "We can't stay here." Elena's face was a mask of focus, but her eyes betrayed a flicker of panic. "There's a ridge half a mile west," she said, her voice low. "If we can reach it, we can lose them in the canyons." She grabbed a flashlight from the glove compartment and a small knife from her boot, handing it to Riley. "Just in case." Riley took the knife, its weight unfamiliar but grounding. She wasn't a fighter. She'd spent her life wielding words, not weapons, but the fire in Elena's eyes made her want to be brave. "Let's go," she said, shoving the journal back into her jacket. They slipped out of the truck, crouching low as they darted toward the ridge. The desert was a treacherous maze, the ground uneven and studded with rocks. Riley's boots slipped on loose shale, but Elena's hand steadied her, their fingers interlocking for a fleeting moment. The contact was a lifeline, a reminder that they were in this together. The SUV's engine roared closer, its lights cutting through the darkness. Riley's lungs burned as they ran, the ridge looming ahead like a promise of salvation. Elena led the way, her movements sure despite the chaos. "Almost there," she panted, glancing back at Riley. "Stay with me." They reached the ridge, scrambling up its rocky face. The canyons below were a labyrinth of shadows, offering cover but also danger. Riley's hand scraped against the stone, her breath ragged. At the top, they ducked behind a boulder, just as the SUV screeched to a stop below. Doors slammed and voices barked orders. 3 men, maybe 4, their silhouettes armed and menacing. Riley's heart pounded as she pressed closer to Elena, their shoulders brushing. "What now?" she whispered, her voice trembling. Elena's eyes scanned the canyons, calculating. "We head north. The safe house is still our best shot. But we need to move fast, they'll search the ridge." Riley nodded, her mind grappling with the stakes. The journal in her jacket felt like a lead weight, its secrets a magnet for danger. She glanced at Elena, whose face was lit by the faint glow of the flashlight. There was something magnetic about her, strength tempered by vulnerability. A woman who'd lost too much but still fought. Riley wanted to know her, not just as a source, but as someone who'd already carved a space in her heart. They descended into the canyon, moving silently, the flashlight's beam their only guide. The walls closed in, the air thick with the scent of dust and sage. Every sound, a pebble skittering, a distant coyote's howl, set Riley's nerves on edge. Elena stayed close, her presence a steadying force, but the tension between them was palpable, a mix of fear and something unspoken. Halfway through the canyon, Elena stopped, her hand gripping Riley's arm. "Listen," she whispered. The faint crunch of boots echoed from behind. The men were closing in faster than expected. Elena's eyes met Riley's, a silent question passing between them. "Fight or flee?" "We can't outrun them," Riley said, her voice steady despite the fear. "We need a plan." Elena nodded, her jaw tight. "There's a narrow pass up ahead. If we can lure them in, we might be able to trap them." She pointed to a jagged outcrop above the pass. "We climb up there, dislodge some rocks. It won't kill them, but it'll slow them down." Riley's stomach twisted at the thought of violence, but she nodded. "Okay, let's do it." They scrambled up the outcrop, their hands working in tandem to loosen a pile of loose boulders. The men's voices grew louder, their flashlights sweeping the canyon floor. Riley's heart raced as she and Elena crouched, waiting for the perfect moment. The men entered the pass, their silhouettes dark against the canyon walls. "Now," Elena whispered. They pushed, muscles straining, and the boulders tumbled down with a deafening crash. Shouts erupted below, followed by the sound of scrambling footsteps. The men scattered, cursing as dust clouded the air. Riley and Elena didn't wait to see the damage. They slid down the opposite side of the outcrop, landing hard but unharmed. "Keep moving," Elena said, grabbing Riley's hand. They ran, the canyon twisting around them, until the sounds of pursuit faded. They stopped to catch their breath, hidden in a shallow alcove. Riley's chest heaved, her body buzzing with adrenaline. Elena leaned against the wall, her face flushed, her eyes searching Riley's. "You're braver than you think," she said softly. Riley laughed, a shaky sound. "I'm terrified. But you make it easier." Elena's lips curved, a small genuine smile that lit up the darkness. "You're not what I expected, Riley Harper." "What did you expect?" Riley asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Elena stepped closer, her gaze intense. "Someone who'd run from this. But you're still here." Her hand brushed Riley's, a deliberate touch that sent warmth flooding through her. For a moment the danger faded, and all Riley could see was Elena. The woman who'd saved her, challenged her, and stirred something she hadn't felt in years. The moment shattered as a distant shout echoed through the canyon. Elena's face hardened. "We're not safe yet. Come on." They pressed on, the safe house in Taos their only hope. Riley clutched the journal, its secrets burning in her mind. Nexus, Project Eclipse, Elena's brother. Every piece of the puzzle pointed to a truth that could change everything. But as they ran, Riley realized something else. Whatever lay ahead, she didn't want to face it without Elena by her side. The canyon walls loomed like silent sentinels as Riley and Elena pushed deeper into the night. The air was sharp, carrying the faint metallic tang of impending rain. Riley's legs ached, but Elena's steady pace kept her moving, their hands brushing occasionally, each touch a quiet reassurance in the chaos. They'd bought time with the rock slide, but the hunters weren't far behind. The journal in Riley's jacket was a beacon, drawing danger like moths to a flame. She glanced at Elena, whose face was set with determination, her dark hair tangled from their escape. Riley wanted to ask 1,000 questions, about Elena's brother, about Project Eclipse, about the way her own heart raced when their eyes met. But survival demanded silence. Elena slowed, her hand raised to signal a stop. Ahead, the canyon opened into a wide basin, the moonlight revealing a dirt road cutting through the scrub. "That's our way out," Elena whispered, pointing to the road. "It leads to a highway. If we can hitch a ride, we'll make it to Taos by dawn." Riley nodded, her throat tight. Hitchhiking in the middle of nowhere, with armed men on their trail, felt like trading one danger for another. But Elena's confidence was infectious, and Riley trusted her. More than she'd trusted anyone in years. They crept toward the road, staying low. The desert was quiet, too quiet, the kind of stillness that hid predators. Riley's journalist's instincts screamed to take notes, to document every detail, but her notebook was back in the Jeep, likely found by now. All she had was the journal and Elena, and that would have to be enough. They reached the road, crouching behind a cluster of sagebrush. Headlights appeared in the distance, faint but growing brighter. Elena's eyes lit up. "That's our chance," she said, stepping onto the road and waving her arms. Riley hesitated, her gut twisting. What if the driver was with Nexus? But Elena's urgency pulled her forward, and she joined her, heart pounding. The vehicle, a dusty pickup truck, slowed to a stop. The driver, an older man with a weathered face and a cowboy hat, leaned out the window. "You ladies lost?" he asked, his voice gruff but kind. "We need a ride to Taos," Elena said, her tone calm but firm. Car trouble. The man studied them, his eyes lingering on their disheveled clothes and dirt-streaked faces. Hop in, he said finally, jerking a thumb toward the truck bed. Ain't much, but it'll get you there. Riley and Elena climbed into the back, the truck's suspension creaking as they settled among stacks of hay bales. The driver didn't ask questions, and Riley was grateful for it. As the truck rumbled toward the highway, she leaned close to Elena, their shoulders pressed together. You think he's safe? She whispered. Elena's eyes scanned the road behind them. Safer than staying out there. But we can't let our guard down. The truck hit a pothole, jolting them closer. Riley's hand brushed Elena's and neither pulled away. The contact was a quiet anchor, a reminder that they were still alive, still fighting. Riley's mind churned with the journal's secrets, names, dates, locations tied to Nexus's crimes. She needed to get it to her editor in Denver, but first they had to survive. The highway stretched ahead, a ribbon of asphalt under the stars. The driver turned on the radio, a soft country tune filling the air. Riley glanced at Elena, who was staring at the horizon, her face a mix of resolve and exhaustion. Tell me about Mateo, Riley said softly, needing to understand the woman beside her. Elena's breath hitched, her eyes glistening. He was my best friend, she said, her voice barely audible over the engine. Always curious, always pushing boundaries. When he joined Nexus, he thought he was helping mapping land for conservation. But then he found something wrong. He called me the night he disappeared, said he'd uncovered something big. I never heard from him again. Riley's chest ached. She reached for Elena's hand, squeezing gently. We'll find out what happened to him. I promise. Elena's eyes met hers, raw and searching. You don't know what you're promising, Riley. This fight, it's bigger than us. Then we'll face it together, Riley said, surprised by her own conviction. She'd always worked alone, kept her heart guarded, but Elena was breaking through piece by piece. The truck slowed as they approached house, the town's lights a faint glow against the mountains. The driver called back. Where you headed? Downtown, Elena replied, her voice steady. Near the plaza. As they neared the town, Riley's unease grew. The safe house was their goal, but Nexus's reach was long. She glanced at Elena, who was checking the road behind them, her jaw tight. You think they're still out there? Riley asked. Elena nodded. They won't stop. Not until they have the journal, or us. The truck pulled into Taos, the streets quiet in the pre-dawn hours. The driver dropped them near the plaza, a charming square lined with adobe buildings and flickering streetlights. Elena led Riley down a narrow alley to a small house with a blue door. She knocked 3 times, then twice more. The door opened, revealing a woman in her 40s with short silver hair and sharp eyes. Clara, the safe housekeeper. You made it, Clara said, ushering them inside. The house was warm, filled with the scent of sage and coffee. You're lucky. Word is, Nexus has people all over the county. Riley's stomach dropped. How do you know about Nexus? Clara's smile was grim. Because I've been hiding people from them for years. You're not the first, and you won't be the last. Elena set her jaw, handing Clara a folded map from her pocket. We need to get to Santa Fe. There's someone there who can help us decode the journal. Clara nodded, but her eyes flicked to Riley. You trust her? She asked Elena, her tone sharp. With my life, Elena said without hesitation. Riley's heart skipped, the words landing heavier than she expected. Clara studied them, then sighed. Get some rest. You leave at dawn. Nexus is closing in, and you're running out of time. As Clara disappeared to prepare supplies, Riley and Elena sank onto a worn couch. The journal sat between them, a silent challenge. Riley's eyes met Elena's, and for a moment, the weight of the night lifted. There was something between them, fragile, unspoken, but real. Riley didn't know if it was trust or something more, but she knew one thing. She wasn't letting Elena go. The safe house was a cocoon of warmth, but Riley's nerves buzzed like exposed wires. The couch creaked under her and Elena, the journal a heavy presence between them. Clara's warning echoed in Riley's mind. Nexus was closing in, and time was a luxury they didn't have. Elena's fingers brushed the journal's cover, her expression distant. Mateo used to say the truth is a blade, she murmured. It cuts, but it also sets you free. She looked at Riley, her eyes a mix of fire and fear. This journal, it's his blade. And now it's ours. Riley nodded, her throat tight. She wanted to reach for Elena, to bridge the gap between them, but the weight of their situation held her back. Instead, she opened the journal, scanning the pages under the dim light of a lamp. The entries grew darker. References to underground facilities, coded shipments, and something called the catalyst. One note, scrawled in frantic handwriting, chilled her. They're watching the stars. It's not human. What does this mean? Riley asked, pointing to the line. Her voice trembled, not just from fear but from the surreal weight of the words. Elena leaned closer, her shoulder brushing Riley's. Mateo was obsessed with the night sky. He said Nexus was studying something out here, something tied to the land, the stars. I thought he was paranoid, but she trailed off, her fingers tightening on the journal. Before Riley could press further, Clara returned, carrying a tray of coffee and sandwiches. Eat, she said, her tone brisk. You'll need your strength for Santa Fe. She set the tray down, her eyes lingering on the journal. That thing's dangerous. You sure it's worth dying for? Riley met her gaze, her journalist's resolve hardening. If it exposes Nexus, it's worth everything. Clara's lips twitched, a hint of respect in her eyes. Then you'd better move fast. My contacts say Nexus has eyes on every major road out of Taos. Elena stood, her movements sharp. We'll take the back roads. I know a route through the mountains. It's rough, but it'll keep us off their radar. Riley admired Elena's certainty, the way she took charge despite the fear lurking in her eyes. She was an artist, not a soldier, yet she carried herself like someone who'd fought battles Riley couldn't imagine. You've done this before, Riley said, more a statement than a question. Elena's smile was faint, tinged with pain. Too many times. Clara handed them a backpack stuffed with supplies, water, food, a burner phone. Stay sharp, she said. And don't trust anyone. Not even me if it comes to it. The words hung heavy as Riley and Elena slipped out the back door into the pre-dawn chill. The mountains loomed ahead, their peaks jagged against the fading stars. Elena led the way to a battered motorcycle hidden under a tarp, its frame patched but sturdy. It's faster than a car on these roads, she said, tossing Riley a helmet. Riley climbed on behind her, her arms wrapping around Elena's waist. The contact was intimate, grounding, and Riley's heart raced as the engine roared to life. They sped into the mountains, the wind whipping past, carrying the scent of pine and dust. Riley pressed closer, her cheek against Elena's back, the journal tucked safely in her jacket. For a moment it felt like they could outrun everything. Nexus, the danger, even their own fears. The road twisted through the Sangre de Cristo Mountains, the terrain unforgiving. Elena navigated with precision, but Riley sensed her tension, the way her shoulders stiffened at every sharp turn. You okay? Riley called over the engine's roar. Elena glanced back, her eyes fierce through the helmet's visor. Just hold on. They rode for hours, the sun rising to paint the peaks in gold. Riley's mind churned with questions, about Nexus, about Mateo, about the pull she felt toward Elena. She'd always kept her heart locked away, her life consumed by deadlines and bylines. But Elena was different, a spark that threatened to ignite something Riley wasn't sure she could control. They stopped at a secluded overlook, the valley sprawling below like a painting. Elena cut the engine, and the silence was deafening. Riley slid off the bike, her legs shaky, and joined Elena at the edge. The view was breathtaking, but Elena's face was troubled, her eyes scanning the horizon. We're being followed, she said quietly. I saw a glint back there, binoculars, maybe a scope. Riley's stomach dropped. How far? Too close. Elena turned to her, her expression raw. Riley, if something happens to me, you have to get the journal to Santa Fe. There's a woman there, Dr. Lila Chun. She's a scientist, one of Mateo's old colleagues. She'll know what to do. Riley's chest tightened. Nothing's going to happen to you, she said fiercely. We're in this together. Elena's eyes softened, and for a moment, she looked like she might say something more. Instead, she reached out, her fingers brushing Riley's cheek. The touch was electric, a silent promise that made Riley's breath catch. You're stubborn, Elena said, a faint smile breaking through. I like that. Before Riley could respond, a distant rumble broke the silence. A vehicle approaching fast. Elena's face hardened. Get back on the bike. Now. They sped off, the road narrowing as it wound higher into the mountains. The pursuing vehicle, a black SUV unmistakable, gained ground, its engine a predatory growl. Riley clung to Elena, her heart pounding as they took a sharp curve, tires skidding on gravel. They're too close, Riley shouted, her voice nearly lost in the wind. Elena didn't answer, her focus absolute. She veered off the road onto a barely visible trail, the bike bouncing over rocks and roots. Branches whipped at them and Riley's grip tightened, her body pressed against Elena's. The SUV followed, its headlights a relentless beacon. The trail ended at a cliff's edge, the drop below a dizzying void. Elena stopped the bike, her breath ragged. We're trapped, she said, her voice low but steady. Riley's mind raced, the journal burning against her chest. They were out of options, out of time. But as she looked at Elena, her resolve hardened. They weren't done yet. Not while they had each other. The cliff's edge was a knife's blade, the void below swallowing the moonlight. Riley's heart hammered as she clung to Elena, the SUV's headlights pinning them like prey. The journal in her jacket felt heavier than ever. Its secrets a death sentence they couldn't outrun. Elena's eyes scanned the terrain, her face a mask of determination. There's a path, she said, pointing to a narrow ledge snaking along the cliff face. It's risky, but it's our only shot. Her voice was steady, but Riley caught the tremor beneath it, the fear she was fighting to hide. The SUV's doors slammed open, and 3 men emerged, their silhouettes sharp against the glare. One held a rifle, its barrel glinting. Harper! A voice barked, chillingly familiar. It was Victor Crane, a Nexus fixer Riley had interviewed months ago. A man who'd smiled politely while dodging her questions. Hand over the journal, and this ends peacefully. Riley's blood ran cold. She glanced at Elena, whose jaw was set, her hand gripping the knife in her boot. We're not giving them anything, Elena whispered, her eyes locked on Riley's. Stay close. They edged toward the ledge, their movements slow to avoid drawing fire. The path was barely a foot wide, crumbling under their weight. Riley's stomach lurched as pebbles skittered into the abyss, but Elena's hand found hers, steadying her. Don't look down, Elena said, her voice a lifeline. Look at me. Riley did, anchoring herself in Elena's gaze. The world narrowed to the warmth of her hand, the fierce resolve in her eyes. They moved as one, inching along the ledge, the men's shouts echoing behind them. A shot rang out, the bullet ricocheting off the cliff face inches from Riley's head. She flinched, her foot slipping, but Elena's grip tightened, pulling her back. Keep moving, Elena urged, her voice sharp with urgency. They reached a wider section of the path, where the ledge curved around a rocky outcrop, offering temporary cover. Riley's chest heaved, her mind racing. Victor's presence meant Nexus knew exactly what they had, and how far they'd go to stop them. Elena crouched, peering around the outcrop. They're splitting up, she whispered. 2 are following the ledge. Victor's staying with the SUV. She turned to Riley, her face lit by the faint glow of dawn. We need to split up too. You head for the path's end. It opens into a valley. I'll distract them. No, Riley said, her voice fierce. We stay together. Elena's eyes softened, but her tone was firm. Riley, you're the one they want. The journal's in your hands. If they catch us both, it's over. She reached out, her fingers brushing Riley's cheek, the touch achingly tender. I'll find you. I promise. Riley's throat tightened, a protest rising, but Elena's resolve silenced her. She nodded, her heart twisting as Elena pressed the burner phone into her hand. Call Clara if you make it to the valley. She'll get you to Santa Fe. Before Riley could argue, Elena slipped back along the ledge, moving toward the men with a predator's grace. Riley's chest ached as she watched her go, the journal a burning weight against her heart. She forced herself to move, scrambling along the path as shouts and gunfire erupted behind her. Each step felt like betrayal, but Elena's words echoed. I'll find you. The path opened into a rocky valley, the dawn painting the sky in streaks of pink and gold. Riley ducked behind a boulder, her breath ragged. The burner phone had no signal, and the valley was eerily silent. She clutched the journal, its pages a map to a truth she barely understood. Mateo's notes about Project Eclipse haunted her. Not human, he'd written. What were next is hiding. Minutes stretched into eternity. Riley's mind churned with fear for Elena, with the pull she felt toward her. A connection that defied the chaos. She'd spent her life chasing stories, but this was different. Elena wasn't just a source. She was a fire Riley couldn't extinguish. A rustle broke her thoughts. She froze, gripping the knife Elena had given her. A figure emerged from the shadows. Not one of the men but Elena, her face streaked with dirt, her arm bleeding from a shallow gash. Relief flooded Riley, and she ran to her, pulling her behind the boulder. You're hurt, Riley said, her hands hovering over the wound. It's nothing, Elena said, her voice strained but steady. I lost them in the cliffs. But they're still coming. Riley tore a strip from her shirt, wrapping it around Elena's arm. Their eyes met, and for a moment the world stilled. Don't do that again, Riley said, her voice breaking. Don't leave me. Elena's hand found hers, their fingers intertwining. I won't, she said, her voice soft but fierce. Not if I can help it. They stayed low, moving through the valley toward a cluster of pines that promised cover. The journal's secrets weighed on Riley, but so did something else. The growing realization that Elena was more than an ally. She was a risk Riley wanted to take, a truth she wanted to uncover. As they reached the trees, a distant engine roared. The SUV was back, its headlights sweeping the valley. Elena's face hardened. We need to keep moving, she said. Santa Fe's our only shot. Riley nodded, her resolve mirroring Elena's. They slipped into the pines, the journal a ticking clock, the danger ever present. But as they moved, Riley felt a shift inside her. She wasn't just fighting for a story anymore. She was fighting for Elena, for the truth, and for a future she hadn't dared to imagine. The pines cast long shadows as Riley and Elena moved through the valley, their steps muffled by needles and earth. The SUV's engine faded, but the threat lingered, a predator circling just out of sight. Riley's hand brushed Elena's, a silent tether in the dawn's half-light, the journal a burning weight in her jacket. Elena's arm, bandaged with Riley's torn shirt, slowed her slightly, but her eyes were sharp, scanning the trees. We're close to a back road, she whispered. It'll take us to a gas station outside Santa Fe. From there we can find Lila Chen. Riley nodded, her mind racing. Dr. Lila Chen, Mateo's colleague, was their last hope to decode the journal's secrets. But the words "not human" echoed, chilling her. What had Mateo uncovered? And why was Elena, a painter not a warrior, so deeply entangled in this fight? They reached the back road, a narrow strip of cracked asphalt winding through the hills. The gas station was a faint glow in the distance, its neon sign flickering like a beacon. Riley's legs ached, her body screaming for rest, but Elena's presence kept her moving. There was something about her, her quiet strength, her unguarded glances, that made Riley feel alive in a way she hadn't in years. As they approached the station, a pickup truck idled in the lot, its driver nowhere in sight. Elena's eyes narrowed. "Stay low," she said, pulling Riley behind a rusted dumpster. "Something's off." Riley's heart pounded as she peered around the edge. The station's lights buzzed, casting harsh shadows. A man emerged from the store, his build matching Victor Crane's, broad shoulders a predator's stride. He spoke into a radio, his voice low but urgent. "They're close. Check the roads." Riley's stomach dropped. "He's here," she whispered. "How did he find us?" Elena's jaw tightened. "Nexus has eyes everywhere. We need to move before he spots us." They crept along the station's perimeter, sticking to the shadows. The journal felt like a target on Riley's back, its secrets a magnet for danger. She glanced at Elena, whose face was etched with exhaustion but also something fiercer. Hope, maybe, or defiance. Riley wanted to ask about Mateo, about the pain in Elena's eyes, but the words caught in her throat. They reached a ditch behind the station, crouching low as Victor's radio crackled. "Fan out," he ordered. "They can't have gone far." Footsteps crunched nearby and Riley's breath hitched. Elena's hand found hers, squeezing tightly, a silent promise. "We'll get through this." The ditch led to a cluster of scrub oaks, offering cover. They slipped inside, the branches scratching their skin. Riley's mind churned with questions, but one burned brightest. "Elena, why me? Why trust me with this?" Elena paused, her eyes meeting Riley's in the dim light. "Because you're not afraid of the truth," she said softly. "I read your articles, your exposés on corruption, on people forgotten by the system. You fight for them. Mateo would have trusted you too." Riley's chest tightened, a mix of pride and fear. She built her career on chasing truth. But this was different, personal, raw, dangerous. And Elena? She was the heart of it. A woman who'd lost everything but still fought. Riley reached out, her fingers brushing Elena's cheek, the touch electric. "I'm not letting you do this alone," she said, her voice steady. Elena's lips parted, a flicker of vulnerability breaking through her resolve. "Riley, you don't." A twig snapped nearby, cutting her off. They froze, hearts pounding as a flashlight beam swept the oaks. Victor's voice called out, closer now. "Come out, Harper. You're only making this harder." Elena's eyes hardened. "We need to run," she whispered. "Now." They bolted, branches tearing at their clothes as they sprinted toward the road. The gas station's lights faded behind them, but Victor's shouts grew louder, his men closing in. Riley's lungs burned, but Elena's hand in hers kept her grounded, a reminder of what they were fighting for. They reached a fork in the road, the city of Santa Fe, a faint glow to the south. Elena pulled Riley toward a narrow path, barely visible in the dawn. "This leads to Lila's lab," she said, her voice breathless. "We're almost there." The path was treacherous, winding through rocky hills. Riley's legs screamed, but she pushed on, driven by Elena's determination and the journal's secrets. They crested a hill and a small nondescript building came into view, an unmarked lab tucked among the pines. A woman stood outside, her posture alert, her dark hair pulled into a tight bun. "Dr. Lila Chun." Elena waved and Lila rushed forward, her face a mix of relief and urgency. "You made it," she said, ushering them inside. The lab was stark, filled with monitors and equipment Riley couldn't identify. Lila locked the door, her eyes flicking to the journal in Riley's hands. "Is that Mateo's?" Riley nodded, handing it over. "We need to know what it means. All of it." Lila's fingers trembled as she opened the journal, her eyes scanning the pages. "Mateo was right," she murmured. "Project Eclipse, it's not just about land. Nexus is experimenting with something extraterrestrial." Riley's blood ran cold. Extraterrestrial. The word felt absurd, but Mateo's notes, not human, suddenly made sense. She glanced at Elena, whose face was pale but resolute. Lila nodded, her voice grim. "They found something in the desert. Something buried. Mateo thought it was alive. Before Riley could process the words, a deafening crash shook the lab. The door splintered, and Victor's voice roared through the chaos. "Time's up, Harper." Elena grabbed Riley's hand, pulling her toward a back exit. Lila shoved the journal into Riley's arms. "Go," she said. "I'll hold them off." Riley hesitated, but Elena's grip was unyielding. They ran, the lab's alarms blaring as gunfire erupted behind them. The truth was closer than ever, but so was death. And through it all, Elena's hand in hers was the only thing keeping Riley anchored. The lab's back exit slammed shut behind Riley and Elena, muffling the chaos of gunfire and Lila's shouted defiance. The night air hit them like a slap, sharp and cold. As they sprinted into the pines, the journal clutched tightly in Riley's hands. Her heart pounded, not just from fear but from the weight of Lila's words. Extraterrestrial alive. The truth was unraveling, and it was stranger, darker than she'd ever imagined. Elena led the way, her movements swift despite the gash on her arm. The path twisted through the hills, the city lights of Santa Fe a distant promise. "We can't stop," Elena panted, her voice edged with urgency. "Lila's buying us time, but Victor won't give up." Riley's mind reeled. Extraterrestrial. The word felt like fiction, but Mateo's journal, its frantic notes, its warnings, made it real. She glanced at Elena, whose face was set with a mix of fear and resolve. "Did you know?" Riley asked, her voice breathless. "About whatever this is?" Elena's eyes flicked to her, pained. "I suspected. Mateo hinted at it, but I thought he was losing it. He said Nexus was digging up something that didn't belong here." She paused, her breath catching. "I should have listened." Riley's chest tightened. She wanted to stop, to pull Elena close, to ease the guilt in her eyes, but the distant crack of gunfire pushed them forward. They reached a clearing, the path opening to a dirt road. A battered sedan was parked nearby, keys glinting in the ignition. A gift from Lila, perhaps. Elena didn't hesitate, sliding into the driver's seat as Riley climbed in beside her. The engine roared to life and they sped toward Santa Fe, the road winding through moonlit hills. Riley's hands trembled as she opened the journal, its pages a map to a truth she wasn't sure she was ready for. Mateo's final entry was a scrawled plea. "They're using the catalyst to awaken it. Sanctuary Mesa. Stop them." "What's the catalyst?" Riley asked, her voice barely audible over the engine. Elena's grip on the wheel tightened. "I don't know. But Mateo thought it was the key, something Nexus was using to control whatever they found. He said it was dangerous, unstable." Riley's mind spun. Nexus, a corporation she'd pegged for corruption, was playing with forces beyond human understanding. And she, a journalist chasing a story, was now at the center of it. She glanced at Elena, whose profile was sharp against the dashboard's glow. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" Riley asked, her voice soft but firm. "About all of this?" Elena's eyes stayed on the road, but her voice cracked. "Because I was scared. Scared you'd think I was crazy. Scared you'd walk away." She glanced at Riley, her gaze raw. "I've lost too many people, Riley. I couldn't lose you too." The words hit Riley like a wave, stirring something deep and unspoken. She reached out, her hand covering Elena's on the gear shift. "You won't lose me," she said, her voice steady despite the chaos. "Not now. Not ever." Elena's lips parted, a flicker of hope breaking through her fear. For a moment the world was just them. The hum of the engine, the warmth of their hands, the promise of something more. But the rearview mirror shattered the moment, reflecting headlights closing in fast. "They found us," Elena said, her voice grim. She floored the gas, the sedan lurching forward. The pursuing SUV gained, its engine a relentless growl. Riley's heart raced as she clutched the journal, its pages flapping in the wind from the open window. "Hold on," Elena said, swerving onto a side road. The sedan bounced over ruts, its frame rattling. Riley braced herself, her mind racing for a plan. They couldn't outrun Nexus forever, and Santa Fe was still miles away. The journal was their only leverage, But without Lila, decoding it felt impossible. The road narrowed, flanked by cliffs on one side and a steep drop on the other. Elena's focus was absolute, her hand steady on the wheel. Riley watched her, marveling at her strength, her fire. She'd spent her life avoiding attachments, but Elena had slipped past her defenses, igniting something she couldn't ignore. A gunshot cracked, the sedan's side mirror exploding. Riley ducked, her pulse skyrocketing. "They're shooting!" she shouted. Elena's jaw clenched. "We're almost at the city limits. If we can reach a crowd, they might back off." The sedan skidded around a curve, Santa Fe's lights now a bright haze. But the SUV was relentless, its bumper kissing their rear. Riley's mind raced. She needed to protect the journal, protect Elena. She ripped a blank page from the journal, scribbling a fake note. "Catalyst hidden in Taos." She stuffed it into her pocket, a desperate decoy. "Elena, if they catch us, I'll give them this," she said, showing her the note. "It'll buy us time." Elena's eyes widened, but she nodded. "Smart. But let's hope it doesn't come to that." The road widened as they hit the outskirts of Santa Fe. Adobe houses and neon signs flashing past. The SUV backed off slightly, wary of witnesses, but Riley knew it wasn't over. They pulled into a crowded plaza, the sedan blending into the chaos of a late-night market. Elena parked, and they slipped into the crowd, their hands still clasped. "We need to find a phone," Elena said, her voice low. "Lila might have made it out. She'll know where to go next." Riley nodded, her heart still racing. The journal was a ticking bomb. Nexus a shadow they couldn't shake. But as she looked at Elena, her resolve hardened. They were in this together, and whatever truth awaited, human or not, they'd face it as one. The Santa Fe Plaza pulsed with life. Vendors hawking turquoise jewelry, musicians strumming guitars, the air thick with the scent of roasted chiles. Riley and Elena wove through the crowd, their hands still linked, the journal a hidden weight in Riley's jacket. The SUV had vanished, but Riley's skin prickled with the sense of being watched. "We need to blend in," Elena whispered, pulling Riley toward a stall selling woven blankets. She grabbed one, draping it over their shoulders like a shawl, her fingers lingering on Riley's arm. The gesture was practical but intimate, and Riley's heart stuttered, caught between fear and the pull of Elena's closeness. They moved to a quiet corner, near a fountain where water glinted under string lights. Elena pulled out the burner phone, her face tense as she dialed Clara's number. No answer. She tried again, then cursed softly. If Lila didn't make it, her voice trailed off, heavy with worry. Riley squeezed her hand. "She's tough. She'll be okay." But doubt gnawed at her. Lila had stayed behind to face Victor, and the gunfire they'd heard wasn't promising. The journal, now their only lead, felt like a curse as much as a weapon. Elena's eyes met hers, raw and searching. "Riley, if we don't make it out of this, I need you to know." She stopped, her breath catching as a man brushed past, his gaze lingering too long. Elena pulled Riley closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. "We're not safe here. We need to move." They slipped through the crowd, heading for a narrow street lined with adobe shops. Riley's mind churned with Mateo's notes. Sanctuary Mesa, the catalyst, not human. The pieces were falling into place, but the picture was terrifying. Nexus wasn't just corrupt. They were tampering with something beyond comprehension, and Riley and Elena were the only ones standing in their way. They found a payphone outside a closed cafe, its neon sign dark. Elena fed coins into the slot, dialing a new number. "Lila gave me a backup contact," she said, her voice low. "A journalist in Albuquerque. She might help us get the journal to the right people." The phone rang, and a woman's voice answered, sharp and wary. "Who is this?" "It's Elena Marquez," Elena said. "Lila Chen sent me. We have Mateo's journal." A pause, then, "Meet me at the old rail yard. 1 hour. Come alone." Elena hung up, her face troubled. She didn't sound right, she said. But we don't have a choice. Riley's stomach twisted. Another trap? Maybe, Elena admitted. But we can't stay still. Nexus will find us. They caught a bus to the rail yard, blending with late-night commuters. Riley sat close to Elena, their thighs brushing, the journal a secret between them. She wanted to say something, to name the feeling growing inside her, but fear kept her silent. Instead, she studied Elena's profile, the way her dark hair fell across her cheek, the strength in her jaw. Elena was a mystery, a woman shaped by loss and courage, and Riley was falling for her, hard and fast. The rail yard was a ghost town, its abandoned trains looming like relics. They stepped off the bus, the air heavy with the scent of rust and oil. A woman waited near a rusted locomotive, her silhouette sharp in the moonlight. She was in her 50s with gray-streaked hair and a journalist's posture, alert, skeptical. "Elena," she called. Elena nodded, stepping forward, but Riley grabbed her arm. "Wait," she whispered. "Something's off." Before Elena could respond, headlights flared, and the black SUV roared into the yard, gravel flying. Victor Crane stepped out, his smile cold. "You're predictable, Marquez," he said, his rifle glinting. Two more men flanked him, their eyes locked on Riley. Elena pushed Riley behind her, her knife drawn. "Stay back," she hissed, her voice fierce. But Riley's heart sank. There was no way out, not this time. Victor stepped closer, his gaze fixed on Riley. "The journal, Harper. Now." Riley's hand hovered over her jacket, the fake note in her pocket her only play. She pulled it out, holding it up. "This is what you want," she said, her voice steady despite the fear. "It's everything Mateo knew." Victor's eyes narrowed, but he nodded to one of his men, who snatched the note. He read it, his face darkening. "Taos? You're lying." Riley's heart raced, but she held his gaze. "Check it yourself. We're done here." For a moment it seemed to work. Victor hesitated, then motioned to his men. "Search them." Before they could move, Elena lunged, her knife slashing at the nearest man's arm. He yelped, dropping his gun, and chaos erupted. Riley dove for cover behind a train car, her hands shaking as she clutched the journal. Elena fought like a wildfire, her movements swift and desperate, but they were outnumbered. Riley's eyes darted to the journalist, who stood frozen, her face pale. "Help us!" Riley shouted, but the woman backed away, disappearing into the shadows. Betrayal stung, but there was no time to dwell. Elena took down one man, her knife grazing his leg, but Victor grabbed her, pinning her arms. "Enough!" he roared, pressing his gun to her temple. Riley's world stopped, her breath caught in her throat. "Give me the journal," Victor said, his eyes locked on Riley. "Or she dies." Riley's hands trembled as she stepped forward, the journal heavy in her grip. She looked at Elena, whose eyes were fierce despite the gun at her head. "Don't," Elena whispered, her voice breaking. "The truth is bigger than me." But Riley couldn't lose her. Not now. Not ever. She held out the journal, her heart shattering, knowing it might be their last chance. Riley's hand shook as she held out the journal, the weight of it pulling at her soul. Victor's gun pressed harder against Elena's temple, his eyes glinting with triumph. The rail yard was a frozen tableau, rusted trains, scattered gravel, the distant hum of Santa Fe's nightlife. Riley's heart screamed to fight, but Elena's life hung in the balance. "Don't do it, Riley," Elena whispered, her voice steady despite the fear in her eyes. "The truth matters more." Victor's laugh was cold. "Romantic, Marquez, but stupid. Hand it over, Harper, or she's dead." Riley's mind raced, searching for a way out. The fake note had bought them seconds, but the journal, Mateo's legacy, the key to Nexus's secrets, was their only leverage. She glanced at Elena, whose gaze held a quiet plea. "Trust yourself." Riley's resolve hardened. She couldn't lose Elena, but she couldn't let Nexus win either. She stepped closer, the journal extended, but her other hand slipped into her pocket, gripping the knife Elena had given her. "Take it," she said, her voice calm, calculated. Victor reached for the journal, his focus narrowing. In that split second, Riley lunged, driving the knife into his arm. Victor roared, his gun clattering to the ground. Elena twisted free, tackling the second man as he raised his weapon. Riley grabbed the journal and dove behind a train car, her heart pounding. The fight was chaos. Elena's knife flashed, the man grunted, and Victor staggered, clutching his bleeding arm. "Run!" Elena shouted, kicking the man's knee, sending him sprawling. Riley hesitated, her eyes locked on Elena. They'd come too far to lose each other now. Together they sprinted through the rail yard, weaving between trains as Victor's shouts echoed behind them. The journal was a lifeline, its secrets their only hope. They reached a chain-link fence, scrambling over it into an alley. The city's pulse surrounded them, cars, voices, life, but Nexus was still out there, a shadow they couldn't shake. They ducked into a crowded bar, the noise a shield. Elena pulled Riley into a corner booth, their breaths ragged. "You're insane," Elena said, a shaky laugh breaking through. "But you saved me." Riley's chest heaved, her hand still clutching the journal. "We saved each other," she said, her voice soft but fierce. Their eyes met, and for a moment the world fell away. Riley reached out, her fingers brushing Elena's cheek, the touch electric. "I meant what I said. I'm not losing you." Elena's lips parted, a mix of fear and longing in her eyes. She leaned in, their foreheads touching, the air between them charged. "Riley, Her words caught as the bar's door swung open, a man scanning the crowd. Not Victor, but his presence screamed Nexus. "We need to move," Riley whispered, pulling Elena toward the back exit. They slipped into the night, the journal a ticking clock. Riley's mind churned. Mateo's notes, the catalyst, Sanctuary Mesa. They needed answers, and they needed them now. They found a motel on the city's edge, its neon sign flickering. Elena paid in cash, and they locked themselves in a cramped room, the journal spread out on the bed. Riley's hands trembled as she read Mateo's final entry aloud. "The catalyst is alive. Nexus is using it to communicate with something. Sanctuary Mesa is the key. Stop them before it wakes." Elena's face paled. "Mateo died for this," she said, her voice breaking. "He knew it was bigger than him, than all of us." Riley reached for her hand, their fingers intertwining. "We'll finish what he started," she said. Together. They spent hours poring over the journal, piecing together Nexus's plan. Project Eclipse was no land grab. It was a cover for experiments on an entity buried in Sanctuary Mesa. Something ancient, possibly alien. The catalyst, whatever it was the trigger. Riley's journalist's mind reeled, but her heart was with Elena, whose courage had carried them this far. At dawn they left the motel, heading for Sanctuary Mesa. The desert stretched before them, vast and unforgiving, but Riley felt a strange peace. Elena drove, her hand resting on Riley's, a silent vow. They were no longer just allies, they were something more, bound by truth and a love neither had spoken aloud. Sanctuary Mesa loomed, its red cliffs stark against the sky. They parked a mile away, moving on foot to avoid detection. The journal guided them to a hidden entrance, a metal door carved into the rock, guarded by 2 Nexus operatives. Elena's knife was ready, but Riley had another plan. She scribbled a fake distress call on a journal page, tossing it into the open. The guards took the bait, rushing to investigate, and Riley and Elena slipped inside. The facility was a maze of sterile corridors, humming with unnatural energy. They found a lab, its walls lined with monitors displaying strange symbols. At the center was a glass chamber, and inside a pulsing iridescent mass, the catalyst. Riley's breath caught. It was alive, shifting like liquid light. Elena's eyes widened. "Mateo was right," she whispered. "This is what they're hiding." Before they could move, alarms blared. Victor burst in, his arm bandaged, his face twisted with rage. "You're too late," he snarled, raising his gun. But Riley was faster, throwing the knife at his hand. He screamed, dropping the weapon, and Elena tackled him, pinning him to the ground. Riley grabbed a hard drive from the lab's console, downloading data as the alarm screamed. They had minutes, maybe seconds. Elena dragged Victor to the chamber, locking him inside. "Let's go," she said, her voice fierce. They ran, the facility shaking as the catalyst pulsed wildly. The truth was theirs: data, journal, proof of Nexus's crimes. They emerged into the desert, the mesa exploding behind them, a fireball lighting the dawn. Riley and Elena collapsed, hands clasped as the dust settled. The world would know the truth. Nexus's fall, the catalyst's danger. But as Riley looked at Elena, her heart full, she knew the real victory was them. They'd found each other in the chaos, two women bound by courage and love, ready to face whatever came next.